Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mind Your Buffalo podcast. This is your host Ravikant, aka the Buffalo Intellectual. I want to talk to you today about a topic which is a little close to my heart. As an Ambedkarite, as somebody who works in the anti-caste space, as a professor, as somebody also like through my own personal life's experiences and through so many of my friends and peers and students XYZ, which is the UGC guidelines. It's been I shouldn't start by saying like, oh, it's been very heavy on me. It's been very heavy on everybody that I know, because it is such a flashpoint for these sort of, like, you can't take it easy in life. You just start feeling like, okay, things are going good, and like you start having a little bit of joy, and then everything around you immediately reminds you what a casteist hellhole you're in. And that feeling that you're baking inside like this pot, like you're in this, आप कढ़ाई के अंदर हो, और like कभी भी किसी भी वक्त नीचे से गैस चल जाएगी, and अब आप you're stewing, you're cooking. That's how I feel. That's how a lot of us feel, right? So UGC guidelines, it is the biggest talking point in Savarna world in the last 10 days. I thought I would like do an episode very quickly on it. Just ho nahi pa raha tha, like I want to say hard work bol raha hu. I want to say I was exhausted and all, but it's just not possible to gather one's thought and do this in a meaningful, articulate, dispassionate way. Hats off to people who are able to do it. Hats off, like literally, like but मेरे से नहीं हो रहा था. इस बार नहीं हुआ, पता नहीं क्यों. Like I was just feeling very exhausted, but not just because of the travel and everything. Just this topic just does something, like people who've listened to this show over the years, I've joked about this, or I've mentioned this, like I can just convert this podcast into an education podcast, like education in the sense like where I just come every week and talk about the issues of higher education in India, the castism, the problems, and I will not run out of content, right? So it's one of those things which is very core to who I am, what kind of work I do, very likely going to be part of a strong part of my next book. Current book already also has a huge part of it. Like whatever I do, it keeps showing up. So this is very, very immediate for me. As a professor, I go to work every day to the university. I have colleagues, I have students. I've been in this life for the last, for the last 15 years, first as a PhD scholar, then as a professor. Like, this is very immediate. But yeah, UGC guidelines, let me just break this down very quickly. If you want a very good detailed rundown, I would immediately advise, if you haven't done it already, go listen to my good friend advocate Disha Wadekar. She's the one who's been working on this petition. She's been working on it forever, for years and years. So you can go check out Disha Wadekar's interviews on News Laundry, on The Wire with journalist Sukanya Shanta. I think she's also doing an episode with Anurag Minus Verma, which I really look forward to, because Anurag's a fantastic interviewer and Disha is a fantastic podcast guest, because she comes very prepared. She speaks with intent, and there's no fluff in a Disha Wadekar episode. Like she will just like, it's very dense. So it would be very useful if you want to know what the UGC guidelines is, what were the issues, what is it meant to be, what are the, all the myths around it, debunking. Best to hear it from her, the horse's mouth. She's been in the trenches. She's been on the battle lines from day one. I was also like, we were trying to do an episode together. It just didn't work out because last week was a little hectic for both her and me. This is not that episode where I try to break down play by play what the UGC guidelines is. What I want to talk about more is the reaction to it, right? So what this what this means, what are all the and where does it all go, how does it all come together? So first of all, we need to kind of understand what the situation on the college campus is. It is so funny to me, it's so tragic that it could almost be funny, because immediately after these guidelines hit, Savarnas started going around and saying, we are going to become, they started crying victimhood. They started saying that, if, they started creating these absurd what if scenarios. Like one common scenario that, if a SC/ST or OBC boy asks me out or girl asks me out and I say no, they can fasao me and trap me by discrimination case. They can get back at me like that for that. Or one I heard was like, this includes OBC also as a category, because OBCs were not in the caste protected category earlier. Like castism, the regulations specified SC/ST. This one has very progressively added OBC to that list also, because OBCs also face castism. And they're like, the Savarnas, they were like, OBC list also has Christians and Muslims. So Christians and Muslims will try to entrap Hindu girls and blackmail them to develop relations. Otherwise, they will fasao them or trap them by making false complaint. Because that's the other thing, like, false complaint clause has been taken away. It is all of these fanciful scenarios, and there are so many more. It is the most ridiculous virtue signaling. Virtue is the opposite of virtue signal. It is like fear-mongering. It is the worst kind of unimaginative, one-dimensional hack fear-mongering that these people have been indulging in and have been allowed to indulge in. Like, nobody in the government had the balls, nobody in the UGC had the balls to come out and say that, can you guys shut the fuck up? This is not what this is. Clearly, this is not what this is. None of these fanciful scenarios that you're trying to talk about, all these hyperboles and aggressive positions you're taking, this cannot happen. This does not happen. It's like, अगर हम मून पे चले गए तो वहां पर तो ग्रेविटी 1/6 है, तो जब मैं छक्का मारूंगा तो छक्का तो और उड़ के जाएगा. तो फिर सेंचुरी का मीनिंग, मतलब टू फिनिश, टू मेक अ सेंचुरी विल नॉट मीन द सेम एज मेकिंग इट नाउ ऑन अर्थ. व्हाट द फक आर यू टॉकिंग अबाउट, राइट? That analogy was my way of concocting a what if scenario, which is completely ridiculous, because in this scenario that I just, like, off the top of my head, for some weird reason I built up, is that we have reached the moon and we are playing cricket on the moon, and then somebody scores 6 or lofted shots and the gravity is thin, atmosphere is thin, the ball travels much further, so I'm guessing it's easier to hit sixes, therefore it's easier to get to century, therefore a century scored on moon is less special than a century scored on earth. If you build so many hypotheticals, yes, that tracks. But are we on a rocket ship to the moon? Are we about to enter a cricket stadium on the moon? Are we playing cricket on moon soil, on the fucking moon? Look out the window or look up at the sky. Do you see Earth up there or do you see moon? Right? If you feel that this analogy that I was building for the last few minutes is patronizing and I feel like I'm infantilizing the people listening to it, that is how it feels when I see all these educated, literate Savarnas talk about UGC guidelines through these what ifs. I have seen people with PhDs, people who are colleagues or were colleagues say, with these guidelines, as a professor, फिर तो हम कुछ काम ही नहीं कर सकते. We can be caught up anytime. हमारे ऊपर तो कोई भी कभी भी कंप्लेन कर सकता है. करते हैं क्या? What are you talking about? So let me start this by just talking about how caste operates on campus. Forget caste. Let me just even say something for which there is a well established principle, which is sexual harassment prevention on campus is a well accepted principle. Nobody is debating this. Nobody is coming out and saying, oh, false sexual harassment complaints can be used as a blackmail tactic against teachers who don't give good marks XYZ, or false sexual harassment complaints can be used as a pressure tactic to get back at somebody who refused to, I don't know, date you or hook up with you or whatever, right? So those principles like are agreed upon. Like nobody is doing that. I am not going to say, okay, is there a possibility something like that happens? Sure. Is there, like, if one looks at, the last 30 years of data, 40 years of data and comes out with like 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 cases जहां पर ऐसा हुआ है, quite possible. Is that the reason why you scrap the damn policy? No. In fact, the opposite is true. The opposite is that a large amount of what constitutes sexual harassment, discomfort, etc. on the campus, in the workplace, goes unreported, goes undealt with, because institutional norms, despite very strong provisions and guidelines, don't respect it. In most colleges I have worked in, I have studied in, I have my friends and students who worked and studied in, the sexual harassment prevention, the cell, the ICC, the committee, the process is an absolute joke. Okay, it is a joke. This is not controversial. This is the lived reality of all of these places. In these colleges, they constitute the sexual harassment prevention committee, cell, all of that for compliance on documentation. If you, God forbid, actually try to make a complaint, in a lot of cases, they although the norms are very clear what the composition can be, there have to be these. So usually what they will do, institutions, universities, they will take the most conservative, administration loyal faculty, women faculty, and put them in those committees. And when you go and try and tell these, people on women, men on this committee that, look, XYZ did that to me or said that to me, and this is sexual, I want to file a complaint and all that. They are the first people to try and tell you, oh, but this is also your fault. Why do you want to file? They'll moral police you. They'll coach you to not do these things. All sorts of bad practices are done, right? So this is in the case of sexual harassment, where there is like complete, there is no confusion about the scope and sorry, my cat. There's no confusion about the scope. There's no confusion about what this principle is and how this is applied. So जब sexual harassment वाले case में ऐसा है, and women are finding it often so difficult to file a complaint. How are the Savarnas assuming that in the case of caste, where the barriers are so much more, where caste discrimination is so difficult to sort of often even operationalize and define, where casteism is so often gate-kept and invisibilized and cloaked under so many different different kind of performances, तो उसमें आप कैसे अज्यूम कर रहे हो कि somebody coming from an SC ST OBC background will be able to blackmail people or file fake complaints? And ये कहाँ से आ रहा है? What is the database? Like all these what if scenarios, ऐसा हो जाएगा, वैसा हो जाएगा. अरे, what about your social reality suggests, or the lived experience on these campuses suggests, that filing mass मतलब कि इतनी ज्यादा फॉल्स कंप्लेंट हो रही है, इतना ज्यादा ऐसे फंसाया जा रहा है सवर्णों को कि पूरा लॉ का जो पूरा जो गाइडलाइन का जो प्रिंसिपल है वही सबवर्ट हो गया, राइट कि जिस चीज के लिए हमने वो उसको बनाया था वो मतलब उसका मकसद ही नहीं रहा. इट हैज बिकम लाइक अ सावरना इंट्रैपमेंट गाइडलाइन. कौन सा लिव्ड एक्सपीरियंस है किस कैंपस में विच गिव्स यू दिस पॉज दैट कि हाँ ऐसा हो सकता है. What if scenario is also based on something that is around you. Otherwise, you start playing cricket on the moon. It's like that what if scenario. What if वहां पर हम चले गए और हो जाएगा तो. Which brings me to my second point, which is about Savarna fragility. Why are Savarnas like this? Right? And across the board, like, it has been so funny to me. I'm sorry, I'm going to be like a little blunt and direct. Like, usually I try to, like, I have been hearing so many of these Savarna progressive Gen Z or like late 20s and early 30s people talk about intersectionality 5 साल से. The first time this guideline hits, the amount of Savarna Gen Z, the so-called that progressive cohort or wo jo hai, right? The number of Savarna women across party lines, across ideological lines, who have come out and basically stayed true to their caste loyalties. Intersectionality cuts both ways. Intersectionality of oppression is a thing, but intersectionality of privilege is also a thing, right? So I can be a queer person, I can be a woman, I can be XYZ, I can be a person of color, but when it comes to caste, I am Brahmin first, I'm Kayastha first, I am Rajput first, and it is that aspect of your identity which in a crisis takes precedence. The number of articulate progressive on usual days opposed to Hindutva, opposed to BJP, like उनकी बात कर रहा हूं मैं जो BJP IT सेल वाले जो हार्डकोर फाउल माउथ ट्रोल है उनकी बात ही नहीं कर रहा. उनका like I have a like straightforward policy. I just block them. Like I've blocked thousands of people of my Twitter. I will block tens of thousands of more. Right? I have no patience only in engaging with that because that's a different thing. That's a different beast. It's a different formation. उनमें मैं जा ही नहीं रहा. वो मुझे क्या, वो तो प्राइम मिनिस्टर को गाली दे रहे हैं, वो एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर को गाली दे रहे हैं, अब्यूसिव गालीज दे रहे हैं. Right? Like I check some of these like some of these people are saying the ugliest, vilest of shit for the education minister. Right? I am not a fan of the education minister because education minister has doesn't seem to have any urgency in a country where every year like hundreds of students are committing suicide on some of our most premium institutions. Our so-called best institutions, IITs and excellent IITs, जहां पर गवर्नमेंट फंडिंग मतलब 500 करोड़ 600 करोड़ पता नहीं क्या क्या कितना करोड़ रुपया जा रहा है. वैसे कैंपस में हर साल अगर 2-2 3-3 सुसाइड हो रहे हैं तो एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर शुड बी कंसर्न. ही इज नॉट. सो आई एम नॉट हिज फैन एट ऑल, राइट? बट it's still very interesting. The education minister comes from an OBC background, I think. And the way the abuse that they're giving is also so caste coded. Right? कि ये देखो ऐसा है. तो जब एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर को नहीं छोड़ रहे हो आप, ठीक है, क्योंकि गाइडलाइन आपको पसंद नहीं है, that you don't like the guideline, what hope in hell does a first generation learner coming from some regional medium educated जिला परिषद स्कूल, what hope in hell do they have कि वो IIT में जाके आपको फंसा देगा? That this person who has come from nobody in his or her family has been to college, first person coming to college, coming out from their tehsil district, whatever, coming to a big city, coming to a big IIT where campus is so huge. You enter the campus first day only, you have palpitation and all that. Okay, like how will I survive? You go to your hostel. Your hostels are coded by geography, and your seniors are asking your rank and everything, and people are figuring out what your caste category is and all that. उसके अंदर में you have so much capacity. और इस सिस्टम में जहां एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर को नहीं छोड़ा जा रहा है, this person who's come from like all of this, like district tehsil background, regional medium, ZP school or something like that, वो IIT में घुस के फंसा देगा. They will entrap some Savarna. Okay, I'll file a fake complaint and what are we talking about here, right? But the issue is not whether this exists or not. Issue is कि there is Savarna fragility, and they don't have to be logical to frame themselves as victims in this discourse. Reservation का debate ऐसा है कि जहां पर you don't have to be logical, because the argument is not logical. The logical argument should be pro reservation, whichever way you cut it. Right? Because if education is a project of enlightenment, if education is a project of nation building, if education is a project of human resource development for national growth, right? If education is a project of building civic unity, if education is a project of building the citizenship, right? Building future generations, then you have to buy the idea of, democratic morality, constitutional morality. You have to push communities which have historically been excluded from this process. Jiन community से nobody has gone into college before, right? Jin families say people have never been to college, you have to bring such more families into higher education. That's the rational argument if you go by democratic ethos and constitutional morality, which I'm assuming you are. A lot of these, right-wing people, they are not going by that. So I have no quarrel only. They are saying, no, we don't want constitution only. Okay, then I have no further conversation with you. ठीक है, फिर हम देख लेंगे. तुम अपना देखो, हम अपना देखेंगे. Right? देखा जाएगा. I am talking about the Savarna liberal English-speaking social elites who I think have the constitutional morality or pretend to have one. Right? How can you then have an anti-reservation argument? तुम मुझे ये जवाब दो पहले. This argument that, these people are always just begging and you're always whining, you're monetizing your trauma and, मतलब ये argument ही कहाँ से आ रहा है? This is not a democratic or this is not a argument from a rational society. It's as simple as that. Right? And people who otherwise take progressive positions on this matter, they're making statements like, no, there should be no discrimination. Caste is bad, but these UGC guidelines will create more discrimination. What is wrong with you? It is a fundamental principle that if you're trying to create some sort of judicial safeguard, some kind of policy safeguard, in a scenario where one section of people are aggrieved, are victimized, are othered, are exclusioned, तो और दूसरा जो तबका है, जितना इनका exclusion है, जितना इनका oppression है, उतना ही इनका privilege है. जहां you have these two scenarios, if you're trying to make a policy to bring everybody to equality, you have to give more safeguards to the more oppressed one. That is a fundamental principle of every policy. This is the most bizarre thing. All of these Savarna elite English speaking urban people, their fantasy is to go for university to Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, USA, UK, Germany and Netherlands and Sweden. Like, you all want to go to these countries. You all want to go to the US, and in the US, you're actually in US admissions, you're directly benefiting from affirmative action policies of that country. Because in your admissions process, in the form, they will ask you, which race are you from? They will ask you, about, in many forms, they will ask you your social background. Do you have are you a queer person? Are you a first generation learner? They'll ask all of these things, right? And in that is also a form of affirmative action, because they're trying to kind of create a more diverse classroom. So your admissions are based on literally a diversity policy, which you're happy to take because it gets you a US visa and allows you to go to New York and California and Texas and Boston and wherever. And you come and you're upset that this principle is being applied to caste in India. Very glad Donald Trump is like, making your visas difficult. Shame on you, truly. This idea that Savarnas have this mentality, it's a mentality of Savarna exceptionalism. Okay, this idea that we own the institutions हमारे हैं, हमारा natural हक है, we will just be here. We have merit, we got more numbers. Do you understand how, like, okay, आपके पास merit आया कहां से? आपने ज्यादा पढ़ाई की, आपके पास ज्यादा पढ़ाई करने का टाइम कहां से आया? लग्जरी कहां से आया? स्पेस कहां से आया? Who taught you? Did you get private tuitions? Who paid for it? How can your family afford private tuitions? Right? If you started taking private tuitions in class 6 or class 5, by the time you come to class 12, how many hundreds of hours, how many thousands of hours of private tuition have you had? And then, of course, what is the quality of that private tuition? The person who's going to an international curriculum school or like, a top CBSE school in a big city and who live in gated community, the kind of private tuitions they are getting, the quality of teacher and focused care, and the person who's growing up in a slum, who has maybe like, one room to live in with 4 family members, who has to do some work, there is no, like, even if they somehow get some private coaching, it will be like, somebody a little literate in the community, in the slum, some voluntary organization. There's no quality control here. There's precarity. पहली बात, तुमको क्वांटिटेटिवली एंड क्वालिटेटिवली ज्यादा ध्यान मिला है. Then there is intergenerational compounding effect. If your grandfather spoke English, if your father, mother spoke English, your grandmother used to read books, you've grown up in and around literacy. Right? And that has a compounding effect on your capacity to do well at school. Naturally, ज़्यादा दिमाग नहीं चलता है तुम्हारा. You're also growing, you're part of this compounding effect. If you come from communities where your grandfather was working in somebody else's fields, if you are coming from a community where your father has to do hard labor, where your mother has to do hard labor, and they're working in a construction job as daily wage laborers, or your mother is going and working as domestic helper, or some sort of a very difficult physically draining job, then those parents don't have even the physical bandwidth to be more caring, nurturing, attention giving parents. Or forget the fact that they don't have the leisure or the capacity or the training to read books and guide you about colleges and careers. You're lucky if you get an education and if you come up to class 12. That person will get less marks than the other person who has intergenerational privilege. इसमें क्या समझ में नहीं आता है? How many fucking times for 5 years I'm seeing this on social media, and even before that, 5 साल तो मेरे को हो गए argue. Like now I don't argue with only people. Some clown, even under this video, will come and say no, but like just तुमको नहीं समझना है. This is a feature of Savarna Fragility. तुमको नहीं समझना है. It is my fault. It is our fault. We are trying to educate you. You can't educate a person who is hell-bent on not getting your point because you're so consumed by your Savarna exceptionalism. ये मैं नहीं समझा सकता. If somebody is coming from SC, ST, OBC background और तुम्हें भी नहीं समझ में आ रहा, I urge you to think more. प्लीज थोड़ा दिमाग लगाओ, थोड़ा अपनी लाइफ के तुम्हें जो मिल रहा है थोड़ा जाओ बाहर, देखो क्या दुनिया है. Don't come with these stupid arguments ki like, this person, he's scheduled caste and his father is IAS officer and driving a car. एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर को गाली दे रहे हैं वो. क्या बात कर रहे हो तुम? चीफ मिनिस्टर शेड्यूल कास्ट समाज से हैं, तो जब वो छोड़ के जाते हैं, या ओबीसी समाज से हैं, तो घर को वो गंगा जल से छिड़क रहे हैं. व्हाट आर यू टॉकिंग अबाउट? तुम्हारा क्या पोजीशन है भाई? गाड़ी ना खरीदी है. How can somebody in a cognizable mind say that the Savarnas can be the victims here? It has no bearing on actual social life. बस वो आपको थोड़ा सड़क में कोई SC ST OBC थोड़ा दिख गया, somebody जिसने आके थोड़ा सा आपको assert कर दिया, somebody like shouted at you on social media, and you've built this narrative that we are in danger. Truly, what a unscientific, irrational society. I don't know how else to describe this. And the Supreme Court takes cognizance of this. Court is saying, we know what's happening out there. These guidelines, if we don't intervene, they will divide the country. Are my lords, are our great courts sleeping when there are hundreds of caste suicide, caste related student suicides on campuses, in IITs, IIMs, in national law universities, in AIMS, in not to speak of all these engineering colleges. जब यहाँ पर बच्चे मर रहे हैं हमारे, तब इनको नहीं आ रहा है कि ये सोसाइटी डिवाइड हो रही है. That time they're sleeping. When the guideline comes, which is based on a petition by the mothers of Rohit Vemula and Dr. Payal Tadvi, right? They're upset. And कोई upset, मैं तुमको बता रहा हूँ, what they will do is, they will say first remove OBC from the list of protected category. Because when you SC ST is there, when you say OBC can also say that I have caste discrimination, तो बच गया only Savarna groups. That's why they're saying, oh, this law targets us. It doesn't target you. It just adds OBC to it. So first thing they will say कि OBC को निकालो. Next they will say false complaint का इसमें provision डालो. Right? So that will be the next thing. And you do these 1, 2, 3 things, they'll be happy. फॉल्स कंप्लेंट की जरूरत ही नहीं है, मतलब वो कंप्लेंट ही नहीं होगा. If anybody ever wants to understand that if I am coming from SC ST OBC background and I actually, let's say these guidelines were not put on stay, let's say they came into effect, and I as an SC ST OBC समाज से I'm coming, let's say I'm a professor, I'm an OBC professor and I want to go file a complaint ही नहीं फाइल कर पाऊंगा मैं. कौन सा दिमाग चल रहा है यहां पर? In half of these, in most of these colleges, caste discrimination के ऊपर आप complain किसको करोगे? How will you access it? What is the mechanism? The moment I do that, I'll start getting harassed in 20 ways. From my leaves not getting approved, money, where they'll make me sit, my office space getting shifted, the courses they will give me, everything will start getting affected. This is not paranoia. This is documented, provable. People have been saying for decades, लोग ये जेल के मर गए हैं. But no, Savarna Fragility is no, we are being targeted. And the court listens. And except for a few political parties, except for, Vanchit Bahujan Aghadi, Dr. Prakash Ambedkar's party, except for, I think, DMK, except to an extent RJD, of course, Chandrasekhar Azad. I may be missing out 1 or 2 more people. I think that's it. Rahul Gandhi, Congress, they should be fighting in the street for this. Right? Nobody is just Akhilesh Yadav, I think, is saying, I welcome this. This is actually another point I want to make. This OBC political party. Truly, Yadav Samaj should think, are Yadav kids not suffering in colleges? Are only SC/ST kids suffering? But Yadavs, like OBC parties, in like literally need to think about their position in this country, in this samaj. This is a big problem. I come from, like, constitutional category wise, I'm OBC. My father's OBC, my mom's a SC. I don't want to complicate it. I call myself OBC. I'm OBC only. Okay, I'm OBC, right? OBC contribution to the Ambedkarite movement, to the anti-caste movement, by and large, has been really, really sad. There have been some great thinkers. There are some like very courageous activists. There's some fantastic political minds. Yes, right? That is all there. But overall, by and large, so OBC, in fact, I'd written this article with Disha Wadekar only, like many years ago. It had come out in the Caravan. We were talking about the problem of OBC categorization, and there are many approaches to this. OBC as a category currently has thousands of castes. Okay, it includes even, scheduled caste Muslims and Christians in it. It has nomadic communities, semi-nomadic communities. It even has some Savarna groups, because OBC is not other backward caste, it is other backward classes, right? So it has all kinds of issues with it, and all of them are put together. But I think Rohini Commission, or one of these commissions, was actually gave a statistic, I could be wrong, that about 40-50 castes out of these hundreds of castes or whatever have benefited about 90% of all OBC reservation. So matlab, there are, let's say, 2000 castes of OBC. Only 54 out of those 2000 castes have taken 90% of all OBC reservation, which means a large section of OBC population has not benefited only from the OBC reservation in education and OBC reservation in jobs, right? Who are these 40-50 castes? These are all, usually dominant landed castes. They will have all these Yadav, Kunbi, etc., etc., So, and most of these castes have their own political parties, right? Which is why OBC political parties are not coming out from these hundreds of communities which have very little mobilizing power. These are micro populations dispersed here and there. OBC power, political power, comes from these 50, maybe 60, 70 और थोड़ा जोड़ लो उन, मतलब इन कास्ट से आ रहा है जिनके पास ऑलरेडी थोड़ा एक मोबिलाइजिंग पावर है, वो रिजर्वेशन भी ले रहे हैं, ये भी कर रहे हैं. These communities, these political parties, although they claim often to be of social justice, they have truly not really fought for OBC rights. The people who fought the hardest for OBC rights are actually scheduled caste. The scheduled caste in this country, even though many times, in the last, most times in the last 30, 40 years, the direct caste violence that they are facing, atrocity, is coming from some of these dominant OBC communities. Despite that, on a principled position, on an anti-caste position, on an Ambedkarite positions, scheduled caste communities have hit the streets to fight for OBC right, not the other way around, right? And even currently, when the UGC guideline is happening, and one of the main points that the Savarna backlash is on कि OBC को हटाओ, इसको भी सबसे ज़्यादा fight कौन कर रहा है? Scheduled caste activists, politicians, thinkers, and rank and file. I don't want to reduce them by saying this, but Chandrasekhar Azad, Dr. Prakash Ambedkar, like, they're coming from the community. Right, they're coming from the scheduled caste community. Although to call them only as scheduled caste political leaders is a great disservice to them. They're much bigger in their imagination and scope. But वहां से आ रहा है, ओबीसी समाज से नहीं लड़ रहे हैं, right? The Ahir, Jat, Gujar, I'm in Noida. मतलब they're actually anti-OBC reservation. इनको reservation नहीं चाहिए. They think life is a AP Dillon थीम. एपी डिलन के गाने बज रहे हैं, थार में ये घूम रहे हैं. यही पीक अचीवमेंट है कि हमने थोड़े चौधराई दिखा दी, राइट? द फैक्ट कि आप गाड़ी चला लोगे, आप म्यूजिक कर लोगे, आप पार्टी कर लोगे, लेकिन आप जो एलीट स्पेसेस है खान मार्केट में या कि कोई ऐसे लिटरेरी फेस्टिवल में आपको घुसने नहीं देंगे, या आप घुस जाओगे तो यू विल फील ऑकवर्ड, यू आर एन आउटसाइडर डिस्पाइट दिस लैंड एंड क्लाउड एंड ये जो आप ऑरा बना रहे हो, आप एक्चुअली कल्चरल कैपिटल नहीं है आपके पास। ठीक है, सिर्फ गाड़ी के शीशे काले कर लेने से और ऐसे मतलब वो थोड़ा सा अरे हम तो ऐसे हम बदमाश है ये करके you're not आप आपका समाज आगे नहीं बढ़ रहा है। समाज आगे बढ़ेगा थ्रू एजुकेशन। एजुकेशन में जो टॉप के कॉलेजेस हैं वहां आप घुस ही नहीं पा रहे हो, और घुसोगे कैसे? सिर्फ बच्चे की पढ़ाई का मैं तो बोल तो रहा हूं, देयर सो मेनी कल्चरल वेरिएबल्स। आपका बच्चा घुस भी जाता है तो वहां पर इतनी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, इतना उसको बुलिंग, इतना उसको क्रिंज बोलेंगे, उसको यू नो स्लर वर्ड्स बोलेंगे कि वो खुद ही छोड़ देगा या खुद ही उसका मोराल गिर जाएगा। आपने उनको क्या प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए किया है? दिस इज ट्रूली लाइक the OBC role in these things need to be studied. This is another one of those, like, I say things like this and then, like, you know, other OBC thinkers and organizations, they dislike me because they're like I'm always saying this. But why shouldn't I? ये तो problem है हमारे समाज में। हमारे जो like OBC समाज बोल के there is nothing. Like I said, there are like hundreds of castes or whatever, right? But as a category, this is a problem. You cannot have this consciousness unless you start saying that this is a problem. So this is a big problem. And way forward, I think, this is the last point I want to talk briefly about. This is actually, I tweeted that this is going to government and the court is playing with fire. UGC is playing with fire. Okay? ये बहुत ही डेंजरस जगह पे लेके आ गए हैं अभी इन चीजों को, क्योंकि the moment the court said proactively कि we are putting a stay on these guidelines, वो जो कास्टिस्ट राइट विंग ट्विटर एको चेम्बर प्रेशर ग्रुप था वो खुश नहीं हुआ। ऐसा नहीं कि हम जीत गए स्टॉप करते हैं, नहीं, दे गॉट मोर एम्बोल्डेंड। वो ग्रुप तो पिछले 3-4 साल से दे हैव बीन पुटिंग प्रेशर कि देयर इज अ Brahmins are being targeted, Savarnas are being targeted, वो तो बोल ही रहा है पिछले 4-5 साल से। So the moment you stay on these UGC regulations, that section is going to get more vocal, not less. It will get more emboldened, not calmer. वो तो अब जाके बोल रहा है SC/ST Act, Atrocity Act हटाओ, remove SC/ST Atrocity Act, remove reservations. Best of luck now trying to reason with them. This administration is basically their party. They are abusing their own government. Best of luck to the government, best of luck to that Savarna society to try and now reason with this group, because they feel that they have got a success. They created a halla and they've got a success. Up they are going to say reservation is bad and remove this and all. So you're basically doing that. The moment you start doing this, you're sending a very big message to the SC, ST, OBC community that, okay, your safeguards are vulnerable to street protests. And if the Savarnas come out and if they scream loud enough and if they go into the streets and they start doing this, then you're right. This will create conditions, and I hope I'm wrong. I don't want this. I'm repeating, I don't want this. But if this happens, this is going to create dangerous polarization on caste lines. Government, UGC is playing, courts are playing with fire on this. This is what terrifies me actually. कि ये बहुत ही dangerous इलाका है. It can crack open very, very quickly. जब UGC, when the court, like, it was like a fixed match. When the court sat down to listen to the petitions against the UGC regulation, UGC should have defended this regulation. UGC created this regulation after consultation. UGC should have gone to court and said, sir, my lord, please don't put a stay on these regulation. We have worked hard and we've proposed this, and this is necessary for the country. UGC goes there and keeps quiet because UGC is also operating in Savarna interest. So I want to ask the UGC, are SC, ST, OBC, student, scholar, staff, are these not yours, UGC? Are our rights not something that you're supposed to be looking at? Why didn't you see? Court could have still put the stay order. That's fine. Why did you not defend these regulations in the court? आपको argument तो रखना चाहिए था. I could be wrong, but I think they did not even make an argument. They did not even put the thing forward. Government, UGC, they did not defend this. They did not make any kind of a petition in front of the Supreme Court. Okay, please don't stop these regulations. The arguments were coming from the petitioners. Is coming from Disha Wadekar and Indra Jai Singh and that team. उनसे आ रहा है कि आप ये, but गाइडलाइन तो यूजीसी लेके आई है. पेटिशन किया है, so the sequence is like petitioners have put it. UGC brought this guideline out, so UGC should defend it, and it did not defend it. What are the larger, behind the scenes motivations of all of this? I'm not going to get into. I'm just very, very upset and disturbed, and have been for the last few days. And this is not at all by any means a settled issue, because the matter is still in court. And if more of these shenanigans happen, the like I said, the right wing is going to get more and more emboldened, and the more aggressive they get, there will be a counter mobilization on the other side. We are dangerously polarizing this situation. This is not a complicated debate. Students of this country are human resource of the nation. For nation building, you have to give all our Indian citizens a good chance, a steady education, and you have to develop them. And that is what this is not doing, right? And UGC guidelines would have, enforcing them would have been very difficult. See, that's the other thing. I will close this by saying, yes, there are many contradictions. Yes, there are many issues. There can be, let me not say there can be many issues with it. Okay, there can be a lot of gaps, but you work these out. There are processes. Process is not you just stay it out. Okay, isko chalao mat abhi, right? And no one defends it. So yes, there are some issues. There can be some contradictions. There can be some gaps. There can be weaknesses. Are the UGC guidelines really great, bulletproof to begin with? I don't think so. Many SC, ST, OBC people don't think so. In fact, many people on this side of the divide, many SC, ST, OBC thinkers, activists feel, this is not strong enough at all. This is not going to be able to deliver the kind of safeguard we need, the UGC guideline. But even this weak guideline that we think is whatever, that they are attacking so much, and the court has put a stay order, and everybody's packed their bags and gone home. What is going on in this country? So anyways, I've just vented for a while, not my usual articulate or structured self, but as you can see, there's a storm in my head. A lot of our heads, सबके हमारे दिमाग में एक discomfort है. And let's see what the case unfolds. Hopefully better sense will prevail. Hopefully things will go to a better, more sensible, more rational space, which is aligned with democratic ethos and constitutional morality. Because in my opinion, at least, this current stay on the UGC guidelines is not at all based on the lived reality on campuses. where the vice chancellor is almost always Savarna, where the deans are almost always Savarna. All the committees, all the institutions are against, heavily powerful against the individual. So if you're a student or a faculty, as an individual, you can never fight these institutions for even settled things like pay and worker right and prevention of sexual harassment, prevention of many, like उसमें भी आप नहीं जीत सकते. तो something which is so contentious like caste में तो आप कैसे ही जीतोगे. So these guidelines should have been welcomed. I think these guidelines, many people from the community feel, were not strong enough, but at least they were there, so we were welcoming them. इसको भी आपने pause कर दिया है, and people are saying, you are celebrating on this. And all these young Gen Z ghouls, they're making reels, these, like, young, I saw so many of these things, these girls and these boys, they are like, oh, they're making memes कि girlfriend बनानी थी तो boyfriend बनाना था तो SC/ST act हो जाएगा. Not SC/ST act, like UGC guidelines. Like, our deaths and suffering are like punchlines to your unimaginative jokes. That's where we are. Think about that. Jai Bhim, take care, bye bye. Hey, you finished the whole episode. Well done. I can't believe you can tolerate my voice for so long. But in case you liked what you heard, you might consider also joining for the exclusive episode that I do for my paying subscribers, because that show gets into slightly edgier topics and I don't really want to put it out in the public domain. It's available on the Patreon as well as on YouTube through the join option. And in case you don't want to drop extra money, I completely understand. Please keep listening to my regular show. I'm grateful as ever. There's a buy me a coffee link in case you want to drop some love. Otherwise, just have a nice day. Stay being awesome. Bye bye.